Let's make the turn to our top story, which is Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. It resumes later this morning after contentious moments involving a witness for the former president's defense team. Trump's lawyers called veteran New York attorney Robert Costello to the stand, looking to further the narrative that Michael Cohen is motivated by revenge. At one point, Cohen was considering hiring Costello at Rudy Giuliani's recommendation. Costello had promised to act as a back channel to former President Trump, but Cohen never retained him, and the two have feuded publicly ever since. Costello testified Cohen told him several times that he did not, quote, have anything on Donald Trump and that he paid Stormy Daniels hush money, quote, on his own. Costello soon became aggravated after several objections by prosecutors, began making comments under his breath, this is a witness, and rolling his eyes. This prompted presiding Judge Merchan to ask the jury to leave before addressing the situation. Quote, I want to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom, he said. So when there is a witness on the stand, if you don't like my ruling, you don't say, geez, okay? And then you don't say, strike it, because I'm the only one that can strike testimony in the courtroom. Do you understand that? Costello responded with, I understand. But the exchange only grew more tense, Judge Merchan saying, okay, and then if you don't like my ruling, you don't give me side eye. You don't roll your eyes. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? Costello answered, I understand that. I understand what you are saying. But Judge Merchan did not like the look Costello was giving him and said, quote, are you staring me down right now? The judge then completely cleared the courtroom of press and spectators to speak one-on-one with the witness. Judge Merchan purposely allowed his conversation to continue. On record, adding to court transcripts, he told Costello, quote, I'm putting you on notice that your conduct is contemptuous. If you try to stare me down one more time, I will remove you from the stand. I will strike his entire testimony. Do you understand me? End quote. Shortly after that exchange, the prosecution began its cross-examination of Costello, which will continue this morning, Joe. So an extraordinary moment in Judge Merchan making it clear that whatever you are doing to perform for President Trump right now, whatever you're trying to do to signal that you are continue to be sort of a tough guy, a thug on behalf and in defense of President Trump, it's not going to work in this courtroom.
Well, exactly. And he's playing like the clowns behind him that all come in with their cyborg red ties to an audience of one.
Yep.
And that makes his disrespectfulness toward the judge, but far more importantly, toward the court system itself, all the more maddening. And why, if he were to do it again, he needs to be sent to jail. He needs to be sent to jail immediately. Just let's take a step back. And Judge Merchan has had to show restraint. Well, every day, you have the defendant going out and attacking him personally, suggesting that he's corrupt, suggesting that the court system is rigged, making it extraordinarily personal toward him and members of his family. And I suppose I wouldn't do it. I don't care who the defendant were. If I'm the judge, they're going to jail. And I would bring them in shackles day in and day out. I don't care if it were a Democrat or Republican, whether it was a steel worker, a teacher, or the President of the United States. You have to respect the judge because the judge represents the judicial system. And I understand the balancing act that this judge is in the middle of, Willie, but you take everything in its totality. Maybe it's harder to send a former president to jail for contempt when any other American would be sent to jail.
That is correct.
This double standard stuff that somehow Donald Trump's on the wrong end of the double standard, that's just, as Aristotle used to say when he was debating Socrates, that's just bullshit, rank bullshit. The fact is, there are two standards here, Willie, and Donald Trump benefits from those double standards every single time. And now the defendant's witnesses are doing the same. Again, I've never seen this. I've never seen this before in a court from a witness, because if I did, well, you'd see the back of them going to jail, and the next morning they would be wearing orange.
And you're right. Judge Merchan has been walking this line for months now, frankly, and every ruling he makes, every decision he makes with consideration of the circumstances around this case, that you have a former president who perhaps wants you to put his witness in jail, or maybe even wants you to put him in jail. Let's bring into the conversation former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC contributor Chuck Rosenberg, former litigator and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, the host of Way Too Early, White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, with us as always as well. Good morning to you all. Chuck, let me start with you. How extraordinary is what we saw yesterday? Are you surprised that Judge Merchan did not, in fact, hold this witness in contempt? Or do the circumstances prevent him from actually taking that step?
A little bit of both, Willie. I think Judge Merchan, over the course of this trial, has demonstrated great equanimity, right? Patience, thoughtfulness. Frankly, that's what you want in a judge. Always, all the time, even under these circumstances. And so I don't fault Judge Merchan for not holding Mr. Costello in contempt or ordering him to lock up for a night. I think he handled it exactly the right way. You stop the proceedings. Importantly, you send the jury out because they don't need to hear any of this. This should not factor into their determination at all. And you read the guy the riot act. And then, if he does it again, if he doesn't get it, if he didn't hear the message loud and clear, there are other remedies. But as a first step, I think he handled it exactly right.
Lisa, it's almost like the gag order with President Trump. I'm going to give you warning. I give you another warning. I'm going to charge you $1,000 every time. Do you see where this is going? To Donald Trump, and in this case, to the witness. Knock it off. I don't want to have to do the thing that I could do.
Yeah, and yesterday, to your point, Willie, sort of went in stages, right? Because the first thing he did was to ask the jury to leave. And that's when he gave the recitation about, I hear your G's, I see your side eye, it's time to knock it off. And at one point in that recitation, when Merchan thinks that Costello is staring him down, he says, "Are you staring me down?" And that's when he cleared the courtroom of all the press. And you can see in the transcript, the press is absolutely furious at having been told to leave the room. But what Merchan is trying to do in that moment is deprive Costello of the very audience that he wants. It's less about the press and depriving us of our First Amendment rights and more about ensuring that Costello doesn't get to continue to be performative in that moment, and that he gets the opportunity to say to him without anybody else there, stop being contemptuous. That has a meaning. Knock it off. And when the cameras went back on in the overflow room, people started laughing because the face that Bob Costello was giving was a markedly different one. It was like a combination of embarrassed and angry. And then Merchan, by contrast, leaning back in his seat, looking at Costello like this, knowing I have regained control over my courtroom. It was really something to behold.
So, Chuck, I'm wondering, just big picture, how much headway had the defense made up until this moment, and how much did this interaction, which I guess was kept on the record for quite some time, even after the jury left, how much did the incident undermine that headway, if any?
Well, they did make some headway. I mean, you would expect the defense to make some headway on cross. With Mr. Cohen, for instance, they elicited the fact that he's a liar and a thief. And with Mr. Costello, who the defense had called as their own witness, they were making the point that Michael Cohen had made inconsistent statements. So, is that helpful to the defense? It is. Was this blow-up helpful to the defense? It was not. However, the lecture by Judge Merchan, I think completely earned by Mr. Costello, was out of the earshot of the jury. Again, completely appropriate. Did the jury see, Mika, what led up to it? Of course they did. They understood what was happening. They may not have known what happened when they were gone, but they certainly knew why they were gone. And none of that's helpful. So, I think Lisa's right. Some of this is performative. It's certainly for Mr. Trump. I don't know how that it helps his case, and I know that the jury knows everything. They always do.
So to Chuck's point, John, we just saw a transcript of some of the testimony up on the screen that the defense did get Michael Cohen to admit, yes, I stole from the Trump Organization about $30,000 of money that was supposed to go somewhere else, trying to make the case that he himself is a con artist, that he himself is a liar, and in this case, a thief, and suggesting that the prosecution is sort of hanging its hat on this witness who you should not believe. That's the argument from the defense anyway.
Yeah, and it's right here on the New York Post. Liar, con artist, thief. That's how they're deeming Michael Cohen with their editorial slant. Yeah, I mean, look, Cohen has admitted to most of this, including the theft. He said that previously. He overbilled a company that he was supposed to reimburse. He took some off the top there. And we know who he is, and we've known for a long time who Michael Cohen is. Lisa, he's someone who spent time in prison because he lied under oath. So let's talk beyond the PR stunt here, beyond the front page of the tabloids. Do we think the defense undermined Cohen's credibility enough where it will hurt the case, or had the prosecution done enough to buttress it?
I actually think that the prosecution did a really good job of drawing the sting and bringing out some of those facts well in advance of any cross-examination. You noted the $30,000 that Michael Cohen took. While yesterday was the first time he said in such stark terms, I stole it, it was the prosecution that first raised the issue. You kept that additional $30,000. And then when Todd Blanche said all the things that he said yesterday about stealing it, he opened the door wide open to an explanation of what was that $50,000 reimbursement for again? That gave Michael Cohen an opportunity to say, oh, I'm glad you asked. You know what it was? I paid a tech company to rig a poll about the most popular businessmen of the last century. And what they did was basically rig the algorithm so that Donald Trump's ego would be satiated. He directed me to do this. I did it for his benefit. And basically giving the jury yet another example of here's Michael Cohen committing another crime or another misdeed for the benefit of, at the direction of, in coordination with Donald Trump. So I think it was a mixed bag for the defense yesterday.